Did anyone at any time in your life tell you that life was fair, was going to be fair? Maybe your parents did when you were a child and you were scared, and they said it to make you feel better. I think we were all taught that at one point in time when we were growing up. The point is, as we grow up, we realize life isn't at all fair. And the examples are all around us. I mean, we see people go through horrendous tragedies and they're good people. They don't deserve it. I think of all the people who died, for instance, in the World Trade Center on 9/11. They didn't deserve that. They didn't deserve to die that way. Babies are born with disabilities, with birth defects. Do they deserve that? No, they don't. Sometimes tragedies are random. One person will escape unscathed, and the next person next to them, like in times of war, the next person down will be, killed instantly. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. Good people die. People who are not such good people sometimes are spared. It doesn't seem to make any sense to us, does it? And I've struggled with this through most of my life. When I was young, if you've watched any of my videos before, you know that my father died at 36 years of age in a freak helicopter crash. And I struggled to make sense of that after he died. I really struggled to make sense of it. But when you're 10 years old and you lose your beloved father, there doesn't seem to be any sense to it. I remember asking God many, many times why this had happened. And of course, I didn't get an answer. And it didn't seem to make sense. My father was a good person. Why did he die? And he died in a horrible way. He didn't just die in the crash. He actually died afterwards of burns from the crash. So, I mean, to me, that's one of the worst ways to die, is die from burns, because it is so incredibly painful to people. So I've struggled with this most of my life, even when I was a child. And you reach a point in your life, you have to kind of make sense of it for yourself. And if you're very religious, you make sense of it through a religious framework. You think, well, God only allows things that are supposed to happen, which, is one rationale. But it's difficult because a lot of people, I don't know about you, but a lot of people, they go through the world and they're still struggling with that. They're still struggling with, what's the old phrase, why do bad things happen to good people? And it can happen in severe ways. It can happen in more minor ways. You're at work and somebody else gets the promotion and you don't, even though you're more deserving. That kind of thing doesn't seem fair either, does it? People get passed over for awards or acknowledgments or whatever for all the work they've done. That doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem fair. People get rewarded that don't deserve it. So we struggle with this on a minor scale and on a major scale. And I think it's kind of part of the existential human condition that we have to try to make sense of this in our life. I was little. I actually died when I was a year old, and I came back. I have no memory of this. I coded, I had to be resuscitated. I was apparently, I don't know how long I was gone for, honestly, because my parents were not in the room at the time, but it was probably a few minutes. I came back. Now, I'm grateful. I've been grateful my whole life that I had a chance at life. But then I also have wondered as an adult, well, why did that happen to me and I came back and then it doesn't happen to other children? And so, especially with children who I think we can all acknowledge are really probably the most innocent of victims that we have in the world. So that's another thing that I've had to deal with in my life. So what it's come down, the reason why I did this video was not just to depress you about the idea that life isn't fair, because we all know it isn't, and we can probably see it on a regular basis. But I wanted to touch on in a moment 3 things that I think help deal with that, help deal with the concept that life isn't fair. I want you to think about something in your life maybe that you've struggled with that you know wasn't fair. And if you want to share it in the comments below, please do that. I'd love to hear from you and hear, what kinds of situations you've been in your life that maybe you didn't think were fair. I've known almost everyone I've known in my life has gone through tragedy. I did a short at some point in time on everyone has a story that will break your heart. And really, that's true. There's very few exceptions to that I know of. So most people have gone through something which they probably deem pretty unfair. And I think the biggest struggle is for people who don't have a belief system of some kind. I noticed this when I used to do bereavement counseling, is that people who were atheists, who did not believe in God at all. It wasn't just a matter of being religious. If they just didn't believe in God, they really struggle with the idea that someone had died and, like, where had that person gone? Did they just cease to exist? People who were grieving really struggled with that one much more than people who had a belief system. So I know that having a belief system really does help with questions such as this. So let me get to the 3 things that I think really help when you're dealing with the idea that life isn't fair. And the first one is, remember that you have free will. We do have free will. Now, is it free will about every single thing that happens to us? No, we can't control everything. But we do control some things. And so when you feel like life is careening out of control for you, or a series of bad things have happened, remember that you can control some things and act to control those things. Such as decide how you want to spend your day, decide what you want to work on. If it's something creative or something productive, do that. Do anything, as small as it is, that will signify to yourself that I have control over this, that this is not completely outside of my control, and that it's also not something that's going to be unfair. So doing just that, taking control of things you can take control of, first important step to this. The second one really involves the idea of a belief system. To have this next one, you really have to believe that there's some overarching greater power than ourselves in the universe. You may call that being God, or you may have another name for God. That's fine. But generally, if you believe in God, if you believe that there is some universal, great, wonderful power, loving power in the universe, then what you can say to yourself is, I may not understand why this happened, but I can trust that this happened according to God's plan. Now, that's hard to say sometimes, but it is the one thing that will help take some of the agony out of dealing with that unfair situation, especially in times of great tragedy. When I used to do bereavement counseling, there was a minister that worked for hospice, and I chatted with him one day, and I'd never heard a minister say this before, but I thought it was so profound. He said, when people are seeing their loved one dying, they pray, but they often pray for the wrong thing, which is that he said, it's not to say that miracles don't happen. It sometimes does happen, but it's rare. He said, but people almost, to a person, always pray that the person will somehow live, even if that person is really old and it's really their time. And he said, what I wish they would pray for, and he tries to kind of gently guide them in that direction, is pray for the understanding of why this is happening. Pray so that you understand why this has happened, why this person who may be a younger person, why it is that they're dying right now. Because he said that tends to give the most comfort to people, to pray to God for that understanding and for grace about it. So when you're dealing with things that are unfair, especially bigger issues, not minor things that happen in life, it's really good to pray for the understanding so you can make sense of it, so you can believe that it happened as it was supposed to happen. So that would be my second thing. And then the third thing that helps with an unfair world is to keep remembering everything you've got. This goes along with daily gratitude. Be grateful. Acknowledge everything you have that's positive, that has gone well, that is continuing to go well in your life. Acknowledge it. Be grateful for it. And don't ever forget to be grateful for it. Because when you stop being grateful, that's when the anger and the frustration and the fear tends to escalate. So I encourage you to remember those three things, especially when you're dealing with an unfair world. You know, we live in scary times right now. We really do. Not just in the country I live in, but in the world at large. We just came out of a 3-year pandemic. Who knows if there's ever another one? I don't know. We deal with wars that are going on at various times in the world. We'll deal with uncertain political futures and governmental issues in countries around the world. So we live in scary times. Probably this is the scariest time in my lifetime. And so it is important to remember that things are going to seem unfair on a daily basis. So find your way, the best ways you can to cope with that, and it will actually distress you far less than it would otherwise. So until next time, be well, keep moving forward. Please practice gratitude. Take care.